Know, O Prince, that between the years when the oceans drank Atlantis and the gleaming cities, and the years of the rise of the sons of Arius, there was an age undreamed of, when shining kingdoms lay spread across the world like blue mantles beneath the stars. Hither came Conan, the Cimmerian, black haired, sullen eyed, sword in hand, a thief, a reaver, a slayer, with gigantic melancholies and gigantic mirth, to tread the jeweled thrones of the earth under his sandaled feet. The Nemedian Chronicles. Okay, now we are live. Hey, Nerks, this is Zach.
Hey, this is Will.
And welcome to this edition of Nercular Reaction, where we're talking all things Conan. Will, what's been up, man? Before we jump into it, what's been up?
Oh, just on vacation this week, so been relaxing. A good time to catch up on some barbarism. You know how it is.
Oh, absolutely. I did watch the first movie again of Conan. Not that I needed to, but other than that, just work. Pretty much just working, reading some comics. I read the rest of the Thanos that Donny Cates was writing.
Nice.
And I'm actually going to do another solo episode to end that off. So there will be a third solo episode coming up shortly. That'll be kind of cool.
Nice.
But so yeah, I've been reading that, and I'm going to jump into Donny Cates' Guardians of the Galaxy run here next. I haven't read that one. So I'm pretty much just reading the whole Donny Cates universe at Marvel, and it's been pretty good. Everything that I've read of his has just been amazing. Dark, very dark, but fun.
Yeah, this whole thing looking into getting ready for this episode with Conan and looking at the Robert E. Howard stuff, it's made me want to go back and read some more of his stuff. I'm going to start reading pretty soon some of the Solomon Kane stuff because so a lot of Robert E. Howard's stuff, like for example, Cole was sort of almost like a first draft of what he was trying to do with Conan, right?
Yeah.
There are some Cole stories that eventually got reworked and turned into Conan stories. Even Bran McMorran, it's another solid barbarian in air quotes, striving against civilization or a representative of civilization that's encroaching upon the noble savage sort of thing. But Solomon Kane, different setting, different type of protagonist, is still dealing with, evil, magic, sorcery, darkness, but just a kind of a different flavor. And I haven't read a lot of the Solomon Kane stuff. I did read a couple of stories and enjoyed them immensely, so I want to start reading those a little bit more. Because I saw the movie, which isn't bad. I mean, I think it's certainly it's one of the best Robert E. Howard adaptations there's been.
Oh, I would definitely agree. I've read a few Solomon Kanes myself, and I've seen the movie. I actually saw the movie before I watched Solomon Kane. I watched Solomon Kane first before I read any Solomon Kane novels, or short stories, I should say. And I would definitely agree. As far as adaptations from Robert E. Howard's to movies, shoot, Solomon Kane's the best. Hey, so how did you get into fantasy anyway? I mean, like, what got you into Conan? What sparked all that?
Well, what originally got me into the character was my dad was a huge fan of the character, and I had seen the movies, and I was like, "Oh, you mean like Arnold Schwarzenegger and all that?" It's like, no. I liked the movie when I first saw it. But my old man was telling me, like, nah, that didn't do it justice at all. Here, read this. And he handed me a novel called The Hour of the Dragon, which is the only novel that Robert E. Howard wrote about the character. It's a reworked, expanded director's cut, if you will, of the short story The Scarlet Citadel. It has the same basic plot, with Conan being the king of Aquilonia,
Yeah.
having been for a couple of years, but some jealous nobles basically make a deal with the devil and resurrect this ancient Nemedian sorcerer in order to hatch a plot to remove Conan, assassinate him, and take the throne from themselves. But the sorcerer is entirely too powerful to be controlled by these ignorant nobles. And it's a story of Conan escaping and trying to reclaim his throne, but realizing along the way the stakes are way higher than just him getting his crown back.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really what launched my interest in the character, but what also ultimately launched my interest in the fantasy genre. I mean, a lot of people, particularly post Peter Jackson trilogy, a lot of people nowadays, that their introduction to fantasy is kind of like Tolkien or Harry Potter.
Right.
Me, I came into it a little bit differently with Robert E. Howard, the more sword and sorcery type aspect, which is quite a bit of a different genre. Particularly, I mean, sword and sorcery and Robert E. Howard's stories, along with some of Michael Moorcock's stuff, was a huge influence on Gary Gygax, one of the creators of Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
So, because all your Conan stories, you know, a lot of them, vast majority of them, he's really just a thief and a mercenary.
Yeah, for the vast majority, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the stories.
A brawler.
Yeah, he's trying to climb a tower to steal a jewel because he wants money. I mean, that's it, you know.
That's true.
So, so that was my big interest, how I originally got introduced to the character. How about you?
So I had seen Conan the Barbarian probably when I was sometime a teenager, probably a young teenager. I don't really remember when, and I liked it. I thought that the movie was almost, in one sense, I thought it was a little boring because there wasn't a lot of dialogue throughout the movie.
Mm-hmm.
But it makes up for it in action, and the story does a great job of progressing itself,
right,
in its visual form without needing a lot of dialogue. And I think when I started appreciating that form of art, or telling a story in that kind of art form, was probably around the same time I started picking up comic books and reading those at the same time. But I got into fantasy, I want to say probably around 6th grade. I read this book, and I don't remember the title of it. It was either Dragon Gate or Tiger Dragon's Gate or Gate of the Dragon or Tiger Gate. I don't remember the name, but I remember I picked it up at like a book fair, you know, those scholastic books, and it had like a blue cover on it and a dragon, and I've always been fascinated by dragons. And I read this novel, and it was about these people that were being attacked by a king that wanted to exploit their talents. They had magical powers and whatnot, and there was another kingdom that was allowing refuge. So they went seeking refuge there to be protected and whatnot. And that book, I've tried looking for it. I've to no avail. I have never found it. And sometimes I wonder if I even dreamt that. I don't know. But from there, that's really where my love for fantasy started. And at that time, my mom was very strict, and when it came to fantasy, it's like you can read C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia, and that's pretty much it, right?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, you could do worse in terms of being, you know, restricted to one, but yeah, I kind of see where you're coming, where you're pointing towards on that one. But yeah, my old man was a little bit more. He felt like, okay, I'm going to go off my son as a person and what I personally think he can handle. So I was, I think I was like in the sixth grade, like right before junior high, before he handed me Hour of the Dragon. Um, but yeah, it just left a huge impression on me because he wasn't a knight in shining armor. He wasn't even. I mean, I kept reading the book expecting him to be overtly heroic. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But and he was spending the whole time, in every story I'd read, he was trying to get money. He was, um, just fighting in some battle as a mercenary, and he was the only survivor.
Yeah.
And he literally just goes, "Oh well," and then goes to a bar, goes has a drink because he has no stake in it. And
So,
eventually, he always ends up finding a scantily clad lass whose company he enjoys, and that is usually the mechanism to get him involved in a particular situation. So but I just it was unlike any other character I read before. He was so unlike what I thought he was supposed to be, not just in terms of his morality, but I had seen the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, which I was probably too young to see when I first saw it. I definitely was, not probably. And Arnold Schwarzenegger's interpretation and John Milius's interpretation of the character is way different. I was surprised to see on the page he read and write multiple languages, was a master tactician, mastered all these, was a thief and a sailor, a pirate, and all kinds of stuff. I mean, it's like it's impressive. Like how could you fit all that into one lifetime? It's a much more
right.
fascinating character than what he's generally portrayed as in pop culture. He's just a loincloth wearing, you know, spit snarling roar, big
Well,
sword.
and yet he's somewhat sophisticated without being civilized.
Yeah, one of the primary theme of the Conan Robert E. Howard stories is that he's a barbarian, but his personal code of honor is much more honorable than the supposed, civilized nations. There are
Yeah.
many stories in which he's riding through a city in Hyboria, and he just doesn't understand why the women are all like wearing these soft clothes and are being, helped in and out of carriages and, are on lazy Susans and, they smell of perfume and why aren't they on the forge, working metal? Why aren't they? I mean, he just doesn't get why these scantily clad damsels in distresses that he always has to help. Why are they helpless?
Well,
Because
and
where
I
he
think that
comes from,
goes back to how he was raised. I mean, the
yeah.
fact that he was born in war, women who
Hmm.
were fighting, they weren't women who didn't fight.
Hmm.
They brandished the sword just as equal as the man,
Yeah.
and fought for each other. And so that's something that Conan saw, for the first 15 winters of his life before deciding to journey off and find adventure and all that other good stuff. Believe it or not, I didn't read my first Conan story till about maybe 5 years ago, and the first Conan story I read was Tower of the Elephant, and that's what hooked me.
That's it. That's a good place to start, man. And you know what's funny? That's Robert E. Howard and H.P. Lovecraft were corresponding buddies, and they were
Yeah.
sort of like how George Lucas and Steven Spielberg would hint at each other in their stuff. Like you'll see,
Yes.
they used to do the same thing. Tower of the Elephant rather. Conan encounters this otherworldly alien sort of being, and whereas H.P. Lovecraft stories deals with humanity being utterly helpless in the face of this unknowable horrors, Robert E. Howard's take is like well, you confront it with this overwhelming, simple and blunt masculinity. Where
Yeah.
Conan's like, well, I don't get it, but I'm pretty sure this really sharp piece of metal is not going to feel good if I stab, you know.
Well, and the fact that you have this elephant creature, I mean, this alien that looks like this elephant, right? And that it's this immortal god that's being exploited by another wizard, and he's wanting to be freed. And Conan, what's really cool is in that story, Conan finds sympathy, you know, for this or empathy. He's empathetic towards
Yeah.
He's empathetic towards this creature, this one that in the description is kind of like a Cthulhu, you know, as he nods to H.P. Lovecraft's Cthulhu monster. And I really like that the banter between Conan and that character. There's a lot of emotion in there, and in such a short story, there's so much depth into it, and then that really is what drew me into it. And it's like, you know what, he was ahead of his time, I think.
Sure.
And especially with today, like I see a lot of writing that happens today, and there's not that kind of depth to it. It's just it's flashy and show and just mere entertainment without having any kind of philosophy or morals or anything like that builds character. It's like, I'm not saying everything that's coming out is just bland and just no depth whatsoever to the story. Not all, but there's some that are out there that are like that.
Right. One of the things that I always thought was cool about Howard's work, and particularly of the sword and sorcery genre that he was pretty much the progenitor of, or one of anyway, is that after I started reading more fantasy stuff like Lord of the Rings, Wheel of Time, stuff like that, I got an appreciation of how in Howard's work, magic is rare and it's extraordinarily dangerous.
Yes.
It's very much portrayed as stuff that people aren't supposed to be meddling with. And anytime somebody does, there's usually like horrific consequences. You know?
Yeah.
There is no kindly wizard in Hyboria. It's always these dark cults, these snake cults of Set, or these dark sorcerers who are meddling in stuff that they're not supposed to. And, you know, magic is something that will reach into your mind and take away your free will.
Right.
Yeah, it's not, Expelliarmus. No. And don't get me wrong, I'm not hating on Harry Potter. Harry Potter is fun if you're into that sort of thing. But it's just after I read more different genres of fantasy, the comparison, the juxtaposition of those two types of settings really appealed to me.
Yeah, I think when you look at all the fantasy novels and works that have come out since Robert E. Howard's Conan stories, and not just Conan, but Call the Conqueror, even Solomon Kane, the magic there is rare. And every single time magic is being used in Solomon Kane, it is evil. It is the ultimate form of evil.
Sure.
But all these writers, they give nod to Robert E. Howard, whether they realize it or not. He is the godfather of sword and sorcery and jump-started the fantasy world that has been created since his death.
Oh, sure.
You know, we all can thank him for that. And Strange Tales magazine is one of those avenues that brought it to the world, and it's a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've kind of talked around it a bit, but Robert E. Howard stuff has been adapted quite a few times.
Yes.
So, what did you think of the first Conan film by John Milius with Arnie?
So you get that sequence where he's fighting for the first time, right? And vocally, you just can't help but laugh at how horrible the voicing of that battle is. Because yes, Arnold is just grunting, and you just can't help but hear his childish grunts. It just seems.
I don't even know how to describe.
Yeah.
That's the only way.
It's like that does nobody fights like that. It's
well, probably one of the things about that movie, particularly in the first act, that reads differently if you haven't read any of the Robert E. Howard stuff versus if you have, is if you've read the Robert E. Howard stuff. I mean, the idea of Conan being enslaved is kind of like that whole part where the narrator goes, he didn't care anymore, life and death the same, as long as the crowd was there to greet him with howls of lust and fury. He mattered. Conan of the book, if you even hint around him being any sort of restriction upon his freedom, he reacts violently. People die.
Absolutely. You're right.
Yeah, if chains are about to be slapped on him, entrails are going to start flying.
You have to literally knock him out or stab him, and you have to immobilize him in order to put him in a cell. And I agree with you that whole opening sequence where he's not opening, but yes, in that first act, you see him pushing that gear and whatnot, and then you see him behind the cage, and it's weird because they enslave him, but yet they're giving him women, to satisfy his sexual lusts and whatnot. And I'm just sitting here like, that doesn't even make sense.
And for him to get that buff, he must be incredibly well fed. Just
right.
Pushing. Now, of course, just looking at it from a movie, that's an excellent moment where he's pushing the wheel, then he looks up, then he's Arnie. You can imagine, John Milius in the audio commentary described that, at the opening premiere, there were like bikers cheering whenever he came in. It was Arnie, because a lot of Nietzschean themes in the Conan stuff. So but but if you're just watching the film, that plays differently. Like if you're someone who's read the stories, you're like, I don't know, but also, Conan being portrayed as a very extremely quiet individual who rarely speaks. He's described in the stories as someone with gigantic mirth.
Yep.
He likes to have a few beers, tell dirty jokes, he very much, he wins the battle and slays the monster and gets the girl, but he's very much about the after party too.
Yep.
But it was, in terms of casting Arnold in the role, I mean, they did kind of have to. You had to work with the actor that you have.
I bet whenever that movie was made, and they were sitting here when the casting director was looking at the how because he's got gigantic girth too, right? And he's a giant man. He's a man of strength. I bet at that time Arnold Schwarzenegger was the man to play that part. He was a bodybuilder. He's a huge Eastern European, so he had it. He had at least the physique to pull off the Conan. Long hair. all of that. Even I think the jawline, all of that, all his look probably was the Conan for 1980. What, 4 is when that movie came out? 1982. Sorry. I guess it was what, 87 whenever Destroyer came out then?
I suppose so. But, I mean, to your point, you're exactly right. I think the producer of the movie, the first one and the second one, ultimately, Dino De Laurentiis, was concerned, like, well, wait a minute. You can barely understand a word that he's saying. How can you be the lead? And John Milius is like, well, look, Dino, number one, nobody can hardly understand a word you're saying. And two, if we don't cast Arnold, we're just going to have to build one who looks just like him.
Yeah.
Because this is also in an era where if you wanted a martial arts action movie, you had to hire a Steven Seagal or a Van Damme or somebody who was supposedly already an expert and just kind of work around their acting abilities. This is long before you cast Chris Hemsworth and tell him just to give him a personal trainer and tell him to work out and have him turn himself into a god before you start filming. Nowadays, they take the actor, teach him how to fight, take the actor, teach him to bulk up, give them that knowledge and whatever. Back then, they didn't do it that way. They felt like they had to have somebody who had those tools, and they would just adjust the script and the story around them.
And I imagine the other actor they probably had in mind was probably Lou Ferrigno, right? So,
yeah, if you've seen any of those like Italian Hercules movies he was in,
yeah,
oh boy, yeah, just go on the YouTube and look up that stuff, man. That's
no doubt.
That's pretty rough. You watch those with some buddies after you have a few beers in you. That's the way you have a good time with those.
And then record yourself audio comment, as you're commenting on the TV show itself, right?
It just listen to Lou Ferrigno's voice. Mouth is moving, but this voice actor is going, just delivering these lines. But of course, Arnold Schwarzenegger's first movie was Hercules in New York, and they did the same thing to him.
Yeah. Horrible movie, too.
Oh, for sure. Well, I mean, how high is the bar for any movie called Hercules in New York? I mean,
I guess the same way as George of the Jungle, where you take Brendan Fraser and bring him to America.
Well, one of the positive, but I mean, I still like Conan the Barbarian, the first one.
Yeah.
I mean, I still enjoy it for what it is. I got my problems with it, but one of the problems I don't have is James Earl Jones's performance in that movie as Thulsa Doom, which is actually a Cole character, because John Milius did that a lot. He took bits and pieces that he liked from all sorts of Conan stories, even Cole stuff, and just smashed it together. But yeah, James Earl Jones, man, is Thulsa Doom. He's legit. He's got some bone chilling speeches in that one. It's like, they shall all drown in lakes of blood. Now they will know why they fear the night. It's like, look, dude, I'm sorry I cooked your steak medium instead of medium rare, sir. I'll send it back. Okay, it's
first with your blood. You will send it back with your head.
Now, one of the other positive, a lot of cool practical visual effects in this movie.
Yes. That's definitely the case. Every bit of that visual effect. Well, so the first time Conan goes into that temple where Thulsa Doom is, and you see the women getting ready to sacrifice themselves over to this serpent king, right?
Mm-hmm.
You got that giant snake and whatnot. I mean, when Conan sticks that sword right up through. Sorry, spoiler if you haven't seen this movie. Um,
Conan kills a monster.
yeah, kills a monster, sticks that sword. You would think that that snake in 1982 was real. It's you would think that they had bred this monstrous snake. You see the blood coming out. It's just the practical effects are gold, man.
Well, to that point, um,
You would think it was like Jim Henson's idea to for that for that snake and the practical effects of that as they were for Jurassic Park with the
right.
practical effects of those dinosaurs.
Well, there's stunts in the movie that you wouldn't be allowed to get away with today. In the finale, in particular, like the final sword fight between Conan and the high priest, whose name escapes me, but yeah, the swords were dulled, but those were the actual hero swords in filmmaking lingo. They were the actual fully forged swords, and they're actually clanging them against each other and bashing the blades against one another in the fight scene, which is something you never do today. They wouldn't allow that. Like you can
Yeah,
literally,
I honestly am not sure what they allow in Hollywood anymore, but it's it's no, you're right. Those sword fights were legit. The choreography of the sword fights were amazing.
oh yeah, in my opinion, it's definitely a fun movie to check out. You just kind of have to turn off that part of your brain if you're a fan of Robert E. Howard stuff
Like
to just
bend the
enjoy.
imagination, a bend in the imagination.
Yeah, you got to bend it pretty hard, especially when if you're like me and you're a huge fan of Queen of the Black Coast and consider that to be like, I mean, it's like when they take uh, bits of red nails and mix it in with that, and deal with his girlfriend in this particular movie. You just gotta let that go and enjoy the movie for what it is, and it is a good fantasy action movie, and a very violent
Yeah,
one. It's not for the kiddos, and that's directly why
it
Conan.
is rated R.
Yeah, back when they used to make those that didn't star Ryan Reynolds.
Well, so overall, I enjoyed Conan the Barbarian with Arnold Schwarzenegger. It wouldn't be till years later. I was probably in my mid 20s, maybe late 20s, that I even had seen Conan the Destroyer. Um, and I thought it was charming in the sense that I thought that the story was not that great. The sword play was okay. Um, but you miss out because they made it PG. They made it for kids in that
Mhm.
sense. And so you lose the brutality, you lose what I think is the essence of Conan um, in Conan the Destroyer. And so my opinions are not so high of that movie. And if you were to read the synopsis or the plot on Wikipedia or IMDb or anything, you'd be like, "Oh my gosh, this sounds like a great movie." And then you watch it and you're like, "What happened?" It's not that great.
No, it's the first movie was very successful, but there were a lot of criticisms about its violence and whatnot. I think Roger Ebert, I think, referred to it as Star Wars, but by a madman.
Yeah,
So the producers decided to make the next one more kid friendly in order to rake in more money. And next thing you know, you got Wilt Chamberlain in the movie. It's just, I mean, it's not one that I revisit very often. But yeah, that one. Part of me wants to go back and watch it and see if it's really as bad as I remember.
Okay.
Um, because I rewatched the first one relatively recently to, get ready for this episode. But the second one, I was like, no thanks. But
Well, if that's the case, did you rewatch Jason Momoa's Conan?
I've actually, not specifically for the episode, but I did watch it not too long ago, just because, I just I had seen Aquaman and really enjoyed it. I thought it was
Yeah.
great. So I just went back and watched his Conan, and I appreciate that movie for trying to do some things to bring it back in line with Robert E. Howard stuff. But the difficult thing about a film adaptation of Robert E. Howard's work is if it's very true to the source material, it's not the sort of big tentpole movie franchise starter that Hollywood is very comfortable making or has any desire to make right now. I mean, you're talking about very dark themes, extremely violent. Yeah,
It would probably be something that would have to be probably direct to video. And something like that's not going to get the biggest budget, though you might see it on something like maybe Amazon Prime if they were to somehow.
I was about to say, I think if there's ever going to be an excellent adaptation for Conan, I think the best place for it is Netflix.
Okay,
Because
yeah.
you could have just season after season, like 10 episodes a season, where, you can actually adapt some of the short stories and, create an overarching narrative if you want, what have you. But I think that's the exciting thing about streaming right now. You can do shows and films that you normally wouldn't want to just throw out to a theater and
Well,
expect it to make winners without millions
with
of dollars.
Disney owning Conan, I don't think that would happen. If it were to happen, it would have to be on some kind of Fox or something like that. Which may happen, but once again, I don't know.
Well, Disney owns the comic publishing rights to Conan, but do they own the rights to the character?
Yeah. From my understanding, when they acquired it from Dark Horse, and I don't remember what studio it was, but I think Disney bought that studio a long time ago.
In September, okay. In September 2020, it was announced that Netflix had made a larger deal involving Malmberg and Mark Wheeler from Pathfinder Media between Netflix and Conan Properties International for the exclusive rights for the Conan library, rights for live action and animated films and TV shows. So
Yeah.
Disney has the comic rights, but Netflix actually has the rights for any live action or animated films and TV shows.
Okay, so Netflix could do a Conan movie or show if they wanted to.
Yep.
So I don't know what happened to your audio. If you come closer, or I don't know, but it just seemed like you're far away.
Okay, is that better?
Nope.
How about that?
That's weird. Okay. I think it'll be fine.
Okay.
So with that being said, so Jason Momoa, I've seen that movie once. It seems to me that it was they borrowed pretty much from the same stories that you see in the first Conan, not entirely, but somewhat. You get him with the witch that claws his back and all that crap, Uh, seems like Conan can't learn from having sex with the witch. But she gets them. She gets them. So I'm I would love to see a great adaptation. And because of the source material that's out there, you could start from wherever. If you wanted to start with Tower of the Elephant, which is one of the most popular, and move into what is it? Something Phoenix. I can't think of it off the top of my head.
Phoenix and the Sword.
Phoenix and the Sword. Thank you.
If they could just get away from these, Conan's entire people were wiped out and he's on a quest for revenge crap.
Yeah.
But why?
Well, he did that already. He had his revenge in a way, and he's not out looking for revenge. He's out looking for adventure. He doesn't hold a grudge in that sense. I don't think. I think he just, okay, life happened, I move on.
So what what other Conan stuff you've been reading? Any at all? You just been reading short stories?
So Jason Aaron. There is a Jason Aaron run of Conan the Barbarian. Marvel started publishing Conan comics again back in 2019. They were releasing the Sword of Conan and then Conan the Barbarian. Conan the Barbarian, I believe, in my opinion, has the strongest start. And Jason Aaron, who's a comic book writer and has done Avengers over there with Marvel, that's probably one of the biggest things he's did other than Thor. He did Thor, God of Thunder. He's responsible for Jane picking up the hammer, Mjolnir, and becoming Lady Thor. And that regardless of some people are like, they gender swapped it or whatever, and it's like, read the story. It's really good. And the story is kind of interesting because Jane's battling cancer in that Thor run, and every time she transforms into Thor, it reverses her chemo treatments. So it's as though she hadn't had her chemo treatments or whatnot. Spoiler alert. So Jason Aaron's run on Conan, it's not a story about how Conan lives, but how he dies. Sure. And you get this story, and it starts off with, the Conan in the pit, and he's fighting, breaks a spear in two, and just stabs this guy in the chest, falls to his death and whatnot. Conan is not a king at this point. He's just a thief. And the Crimson Witch makes an appearance in the first issue, seduces him. Once again, the witch in the bed, right, type deal. Claws poison him. He passes out. He ends up in the Tower of Razazel, which is a league in the earth in his ancient tower, which is older than that of Atlantis.
Mm-hmm.
And she gives birth to these twins. Their names escape me for a moment. I'm sorry for that. And he escapes for a moment, and then she's given this prophecy that it's in your bones. Your bones tell that you will die, and you will resurrect Razazel or Razazel, however you want to pronounce this doom demon.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, whatever, type thing. This is, if your prophecies are so great, then you should have been able to see that in your bones you will die. And then he beheads her and whatnot. Does he kill her? you find out no, he doesn't kill her because years later, after Conan becomes a king, because in the prophecy you will be king, and it'll be the blood of you as a king that will revive this demon god type deal, right? This cult. And she's got death magic. She's very powerful with this death magic. So she's resurrecting fallen soldiers, and they look like hordes of zombie creatures that are coming after you, whatnot,
Right.
to just destroy Conan. And
Mhm.
so at the end of issue 1, it goes a few years in the future. I think it's 5 years in the future. Conan's a king. He comes across the twins. They don't age for whatever reason. These twins don't age. That the Crimson Witch gives birth to, and they stab him in the back while they're out on this battlefield. Conan fought this battle, slayed everybody, and he's going around and killing all the bodies that are still suffering. We don't leave them to suffer. We will kill them. So he's out there killing them, and you see these two kids out there harvesting the bodies in this sense, and he's like, this is not lawful. Why are you out here? And the kids give their spiel of how our mother taught us that battle is the grapes of the harvest, and whatnot. And so they're out there, and as Conan turns his back and walks away, they stab him in the back, and then you see the Scarlet Witch, or not Scarlet Witch, the Crimson Witch, with her head lopped off and hanging by sinew and a little bit.
That's pretty gnarly. I'm gonna have to read some of that, man.
And whatnot, and she's like, it is now time, and so the next 11 issues, as life flashes before your eyes, within the next 11 issues, each issue tells a journey of Conan that leads up to his own resurrection, because Conan does resurrect from the grave, and you find that out in issue 11.
That's cool.
And then you get this really big reveal in issue 12. It's a fantastic story. It's one of my favorites in the modern. I'm sorry.
I'm looking forward to it, man. I'm definitely going to give it a read for sure.
So I've been reading that. I've been reading, and then Jim Zub took over after Jason Aaron's run, and that series is pretty good. I'm not actually going to get into any spoilers or whatnot. I've only actually read 2 issues of Jim Zub's run, and he's already 8 issues in, and I just need to catch up on it. And at the moment, I've just been reading Donny Cates stuff and reading some indie titles. Radiant Black by Kyle Higgins, which is really good. Berserker by Keanu Reeves, which is excellent. I've also picked up a heavy metal published magazine called Dark Wing, and it's a sci-fi series. Takes place in space, and it's pretty good. I like it. It's got 3 issues out. It's enjoyable. Reading Tarna. I don't know if you remember Tarna from Heavy Metal.
Yes.
The animated movie. And so I'm on the 2nd series of Tarna. And it's fairly excellent as well. Reading Norse mythology adaptation from the book of Neil Gaiman, and Thor. Reading Thor by Donny Cates. So
yeah, I don't know if you're into audiobooks at all, but because you mentioned Neil Gaiman, you ought to listen to Audible's presentation of The Sandman by Neil Gaiman.
I have that, and I've started it, and it's excellent.
Yeah. If you guys are at all into audiobooks or anything, is amazing. The Sandman, it's A+.
The
Super.
Sandman series is incredible as it is
Sure.
as a comic.
Yeah, it's one of those. I hate to say that it's one of those, like, quote unquote, if you there's in the short list of comics you need to read, but because I think you can oversell things by saying stuff like that. But yeah, Sandman's definitely one of them. It's one of those that you read, and it's a very unique experience.
This opinion of mine, I don't know if it's popular or not, but my opinion is that Neil Gaiman is our Mark Twain. He is our Shakespeare. He is the author of literature of our time, of our era. I think he's one of the most essential authors that we should be reading. There's a lot of depth and meaning to the works that he's written, that he continues to put out. And I don't care if you want to read the novels. I don't care if you want to read the adaptations that are put into comics. I don't care if you want to read his original comics. You got to read them. I mean, it's
Right.
In my opinion, they're essential. They're essential.
Yeah, they're great. But yeah, man, it's good talking to you. Let's,
So what would you
yeah.
like to talk about in the next episode?
Oh man, so many things. Yeah, we'll. Okay, I'll tell you what. We brought up Netflix.
Okay.
You come with a show. I'll come with a show.
Okay.
Sound good?
Sounds good. I have not. I've been wanting to watch Castlevania. I haven't seen it yet, so
That's a good.
I think what I'll do is I will watch the series of Castlevania, and
I'll tell you what. You talk about Castlevania. I'll talk about Blood of Zeus.
sounds great because that's another one that's on my list.
There you go.
All right, we thank you guys for sticking with this episode, and we've gone over 50 minutes in this one. That's this is going to be our longest episode yet. But anyway, I want to thank you all for joining us today. And if you haven't read Conan, you need to just get out there and read some Conan, watch some Conan. Whether you want to read the short stories, get in the comics. The comics are what I've read first of Conan. It wasn't until I bought this book right here, that I started reading any of the short stories of Conan, and this is a really good book. There's three of these novels out there. They're packed full of short stories of Conan. Every single one that written by Robert E. Howard. Go check it out. And with that, I am Zach.
I'm Will.
And thank you guys. Have a good night, good day, whatever time it is. Bye.